postman's just been. She comes this time in the morning, regular as clockwork, and I always keep an eye out for her. Not sure why, because the only things we get are, well, junk mail, bills, charity letters, but it gives me something to do. I have to leave the bills on the kitchen table unopened. That's because Bill has always taken care of the finances. He won't let me anywhere near money, except what he gives me for housekeeping. In my whole life, I've never had a bank account with money of my own. Years ago, I suggested I got a job so I had my own money coming in, but he blew his top. Said who would do the housework if we were both out at work? It's my birthday soon, so I really thought there might be one or two cards, but no, not today. I spend loads of time just looking out of this window, watching the birds. They look so free. They could fly anywhere they want to. Our house is on the edge of an estate, and between the two houses opposite there's an overgrown footpath that hardly anyone uses. It leads down through the woods to the old village, and I wish I lived in a house like that. I'm told they're very nice, and once, a few years ago, I set out to have a look for myself, but there were too many briars, and when it started to rain, the path got muddy, so I came back. I never went anymore. Don't know why. Maybe because I knew Bill wouldn't like it. When I was a child, we lived in a suburban semi across the other side of town. I suppose it was a typical middle-class house like this. I hated it. You see, I was an only child, and my parents were very strict. My mother was always telling me off for being unladylike or being late home or wearing the wrong clothes. And sometimes my father took a cane to me. If he did it today, he'd be arrested. The highlight of my teenage years was when my teacher persuaded father to let me go on a school trip to Spain for a week. I was only 15, but I loved it. The sun, the way they speak, the food they eat. I didn't want to come home. I don't think I was a rebel, but when I met Bill at my cousin's wedding, we found ways to meet without my parents knowing. And when he asked me to move in with him, I thought, why not? Anything was better than home. He was a bit older than me, but very good looking, and he had a motorbike. I was just out of school, naive I suppose, too young and inexperienced, and you know what they say, marry in haste, repent at leisure. Only, we never did marry. My parents were furious. They said that if I didn't come home at once, not to come home at all. And I don't know where I got the strength. But I chose to stay with Bill, and so apart from Grandad's funeral, when they completely snubbed me, that was the last I saw of them. Grandad was different. He was an eccentric old man, but always full of fun. After Gran died and he got ill, he went to live in a home, and I'd often go and see him. Despite being in constant pain, he never failed to cheer me up. I'd do things for him, such as find things he'd misplaced. He was always losing his hearing aids or his teeth, and I'd trim his hair, even cut his toenails. His one joy was to watch the birds on the bird table outside his window. So I'd bring bird food and we'd sit together for hours looking at the birds, drinking cups of tea and identifying different species from his pile of nature books. He could be a mischievous old codger. Ran rings round the staff, but somehow or other he always managed to make everyone laugh. Once he persuaded me to sneak in a big bag of fish and chips that he wasn't supposed to eat because they put him on a diet. But he said at his age, who cared? He had to keep the window open so no one could smell them. He told me I'd get my reward in heaven, and I told him I wouldn't hold my breath. But he had a strange twinkle in his eye, and he leaned close to me and he said, "You never know, my girl, you never know." And then he burst out laughing. I had no idea why he found it so funny. All I know is I love that old man. When I got pregnant, I wrote and told my mother and father, but they didn't write back. That really upset me. But when I told Grandad, he dried my tears, told me he loved me and said it was wonderful news. Then, when Terry was born, I used to take him with me to the home, and it was the highlight of Grandad's week. He'd carry him round and show him off to all the other old people, and they'd make a real fuss of him. Grandad always said that sometimes life could be hard, and he told me about when Grandad had a miscarriage and how upset they'd been. But he said no matter what happens in life, you have to get on with it and look for the light at the end of the tunnel. Every cloud has a silver lining, he'd say. And when I asked him what he did to keep himself cheerful, he said he always found something to look forward to. Anything. It could be something as simple as having a nice cup of tea. Before Gran and Grandad retired, they used to run an antique shop. Nothing posh, but they made a good living. Sold it for a healthy sum, and when he died, I thought some of that might come my way. But it all went to my parents. And when they died, they left it to charity. I never saw a penny of it. That was years ago. Terry's grown up now. He works with Bill in his electrical business. It's just the two of them, but they make lots of money. They've become inseparable, more like brothers than father and son. They even look alike. To be honest, I hardly see them. Every morning they go out in the van, and every evening they come home. When they've eaten, they get washed and changed and go out. Sometimes to the pub or a football match or a ride on their motorbikes. So I spend most of my life on my own. Well, I try to keep myself busy, but the days are long. Every morning I'm first up to make breakfast for them. After they've gone to work, I wash up the dishes, make the beds, maybe do a bit of vacuuming. Then there's the weekly washing and ironing to see to, but it's a long day on your own. Sometimes I wish I could just pop out to see someone for a chat over a cup of tea, but all the neighbours are out at work. That's why I spend so much of my life looking out the window, watching the birds. Done it for years. Habit, I suppose.
Me encantaría vaya gracias. Me encantaría vaya gracias. I was sitting here remembering what Grandad said all those years ago about trying to find something to look forward to. Well, there was the weekly bus trip to town to do the shopping, of course, but there was nothing much else. But one day, a little while ago, when I was walking past a charity shop, I saw this pack, Teach Yourself Spanish, and I thought, that'll give me something to do. It was only cheap, so I bought it. I hid it at the back of my wardrobe so Bill wouldn't find it. When Bill and Terry have gone to work, I sit here with my headphones on, listen to the recordings that came with it. It's split into units, and I've already finished the first one. Listen. Me encantaría bailar gracias. That means I'd love to dance, thank you. No good saying that to Bill. He hates dancing. One day, when I'd finished my hour of Spanish, I was sitting wondering what else I could do when my eyes rested on the path between the houses. If I set off straight away, I'd have plenty of time to get there and back before Bill came home. This time, although it was cold, the sun was shining, so the ground was hard and dry, and I soon discovered that most of the briars had been cut back. It took me about 15 minutes of brisk walking, but it was well worth the effort. What I saw when I came out from under the trees took my breath away. There was a village green with a big duck pond surrounded by thatched cottages, a huge weeping willow tree, and a lovely old church, even a village shop. Keeping one eye on the time so that I wouldn't be late home, I walked around the churchyard for a while, reading some of the headstones, and then sat on a seat by the pond watching the antics of the ducks. I was well wrapped up, but even so it was a bit too cold for sitting, so I went in the shop for a quick look round. It sold everything: newspapers, birthday cards, groceries, all sorts of cooked meats and cheeses, bread, wine, stuff like that, and it was lovely and warm. I thought to myself, this is so nice. Why have I waited all this time to come here? Imagine my surprise when I discovered that the owner of the shop was a Spanish chap called Mr. Caputo. When Bill came home, I told him a lie. He's always moaning about some of the things I buy at the supermarket. So I said I'd overheard a woman at the bus stop talking about a shop just a short walk away, that sold freshly baked bread and locally grown vegetables. I said I might do some of the shopping there, and what did he think? You see, he loves his food, that's why he's so overweight, so I knew he'd like the idea. I wasn't surprised when he said I should find out where it was and do some of the shopping there. So I started going regularly. It was quite a trek carrying heavy shopping bags, but it gave me something to look forward to. After I'd been going there for a few weeks, just as Mr. Caputo was handing me my change, I said, "Muchas gracias." I don't know why I said it, it just slipped out. He raised his eyebrows in surprise, smiled his lovely smile and said, "Hablas español?" And I said, "Oh no, I don't speak Spanish. Well, not really, just a little." I told him about the discs and the book I was using, and he said he never got a chance to speak Spanish and would I like to come for lunch one day. He offered to make me a bite to eat and help me with my pronunciation over a cup of tea, and he pointed out how much he'd enjoyed using his mother tongue for a change. I didn't know what to say. It sounded a bit, well, I don't know, risky, I suppose, but he seemed such a nice man, so I said I'd be delighted.
I've been going to Mr. Caputo's for quite a while now, just for an hour or so. I do my shopping and then he puts up the close sign while we eat lunch and speak Spanish. Mr. Caputo, or Dario as I call him now, is a real gentleman, quite good looking. I've learnt a lot about him. He's a bit younger than me and an excellent cook too. When he said he'd give me lunch, I thought he meant a sandwich. He's been making me wonderful Spanish dishes. Apparently his wife never did any cooking. He did it all. I wish Bill was like that. Dario married a London girl who he met when she was on holiday in Spain. He agreed to move to England to buy a shop and live here. They only had one child, like me, a son. But he moved to Australia, so he doesn't see much of him. Sadly, Dario's wife died a few years ago, so he's on his own now. But he has a family in Spain who own a small vineyard run by his brother. By the way, the Spanish for vineyard is viñedo. See, I'm improving. I told him all about my life, how unhappy I'd been as a child, about Grandad and how lovely he used to be, how traumatic it was when I moved in with Bill, and about when Terry was born. At first, I said that looking after two men kept me happy enough, but when I got to know Dario better, I felt able to tell him how bored and unhappy I really was. Being Spanish, when he found out that Bill and me weren't married, I could tell he disapproved. Mind you, he never said anything. He's far too polite. But I do like talking to him. It's as if we've known each other for years, and my Spanish is getting better and better. Well, not that I'll ever get to use it.
When I went to get the post today, there was a birthday card from Dario. I put it in my apron pocket. I keep taking it out and reading it. I didn't show Bill. He'd only jumped to the wrong conclusion and, well, he's got a nasty temper. Oh, I expect we'll go down the pub like we do every year. I'll sit with the wives while Bill and Terry and his girlfriend stand at the bar with their mates. I'd love to go out for a posh meal, but Bill doesn't like eating out. Oh well, I suppose I'm used to that. There was also a letter for me, an official-looking one from a solicitor asking me to make an appointment, but it didn't say why. I didn't tell Bill because I thought it would be better to find out what it was first. So I'll ring and arrange a time to go there on my shopping day. When I got to her office, I was so nervous. I'd never been in a solicitor's before, but she sat me down in a really comfortable leather chair and her assistant brought me a nice cup of coffee. So I soon started to relax. She said there was nothing to worry about, and she handed me a parcel. She told me Grandad gave it to them just before he died, and it had been in their safe with instructions to give it to me after my 60th birthday. I asked if I could open it, and she said it was mine, so I could do what I liked with it. I think she was as curious as I was to know what it was, so I carefully unwrapped it. Well, came as a bit of a shock to find it was a book. But when I saw the wonderful hand-drawn pictures of birds inside it, I knew it was something special. In my mind's eye, I could see Grandad winking at me. I smiled and I thought, thanks, Grandad. I'll look forward to reading it. I never told Bill any of this, of course.
That same week, I went to Dario's as usual. I was dying to tell him about what had happened at the solicitors. I was surprised to find a sign hanging in the window saying, "Closed due to unforeseen circumstances." I tried ringing the bell, but it was obvious the whole place was locked up, so I went home. A week later, I went back. The shop was still closed, but this time Dario was there. When he saw me through the window, he unlocked the door and let me in. It was obvious he was very agitated. And before I could tell him my good news, he said he wanted to apologise for having to leave me without telling me he'd had a message saying his brother had died suddenly, so he'd had to fly to Spain. I told him how sorry I was, but then, when he went on to say he was going to put the shop up for sale, I was near to tears. I asked him why, and he explained he'd inherited the family vineyard, and because he was the only surviving relative, it was his duty to go back to Spain to look after it. Now, I know it sounds selfish, but I suddenly realised Dario had become a large part of my life, and I didn't want him to go. What was I going to do when he went? Suddenly, he took hold of my hands, went down on one knee and said, "You are an unmarried woman, Sandra, and I am a widower. I know how it is at home for you. Your husband, he treats you very badly. You and me, we are good together, like how you say the Derby and the Joan. Would you please do me the honour of being my wife?" For a second or two, I just stood there, my mouth open like a silly little schoolgirl. And when I didn't say anything, Dario said, "We will be so happy in Spain, you and I. We will run the vineyard together." I couldn't believe my ears. He wanted me to be his wife. My mind was in a whirl and I panicked. What had I got to offer him? I had nothing of my own, no money, nothing like that. The house and everything, it was owned by Bill. I couldn't look at him. I wanted to throw my arms around his neck and say, "Yes, of course I will," but instead I let go of his hands. I thanked him and said that although I was flattered, it was out of the question. Dario got to his feet and stood, not knowing what to do with his hands, and his voice took on a formal note. He said he completely understood and he was sorry he'd had to spring it on me at such short notice, but hoped I realised that circumstances had left him no choice. He said that if I ever changed my mind to write to him, and then he jotted down his address in Spain on a piece of paper and handed it to me. There was silence for a while, and then, to my surprise, he leaned over and kissed me gently on the cheek, and I thought, what a lovely man. I felt tears welling in my eyes, and I tried to speak, but I couldn't find a word, so I turned and left the shop. I cried all the way home.
Did I tell you that Terry has yet another new girlfriend? She's got a motorbike too, and she's as mad about football as they are. So who knows, maybe this one will last. Just after my birthday, she moved in with us, and now the three of them go everywhere together. No one asked me what I felt about it. But she's not the first. It makes no difference to me anyway, because my life never changes. The only difference it makes is I have more clothes to wash and another mouth to feed. And now Dario's gone, my one chance of happiness, it's just one more thing in my life that's gone wrong. What do I look forward to now, Grandad? Grandad told me to be strong and look for the light at the end of the tunnel, and he was right. It came a few weeks ago in the form of 2 letters. One from the solicitors about the book,
and another from the bank with a credit card enclosed, telling me I now had an account with them. At last, I could buy things without asking anyone's permission. This morning, I ordered a taxi and went into town. I had my hair done at very expensive hairdressers, and then I raced round the upmarket shops and bought a whole new wardrobe. When I got home, I asked the taxi driver to help me carry it all into the house, and then I sent him off to have some lunch while I packed it into 3 brand new suitcases. He'll be back any second, and I know he won't be late because I gave him a very good tip. You see, I wrote a letter to Dario to tell him I'd changed my mind, and if he still wanted me, I'd like to accept his offer of marriage. Then I waited every morning for the post to arrive, and when I saw an airmail letter on the mat, I couldn't wait to read it. In the letter, Dario said he was delighted that I'd had a change of heart and that his son was dying to meet me and would be flying over especially for the wedding. I went straight to the solicitors and she helped me to fill in my passport application. As soon as it arrived, I bought a one-way ticket to Spain. Then I wrote to Dario telling him the time and date of my arrival so he could be there to meet me. You see, Grandad changed my world. The book he gave me was called The Birds of America, written by a man called John James Audubon. But I won't be reading it during the flight because I haven't got it anymore. It turned out to be a first edition, and the solicitor told me it was worth quite a bit of money, so I asked her to sell it for me. I nearly fainted when she told me it had been sold at auction for £6 million. Now I have enough money to live the rest of my life with Dario in utter luxury. Oh, God. Look at me. I'm shaking. I can hardly believe that in a few hours I'll be flying off to a new life, never to return. And while I'm flying over the channel, Bill, Terry and his girlfriend will come home from work to find a letter leaning against the teapot on the kitchen table. It explains I've left them for good and that from now on they'll have to cook their own meals. I thought I'd feel some kind of remorse, but to be honest, they'll soon forget me. And if they all chip in, they'll be able to replace me with a housekeeper. Ah, here's the taxi. Dead on time. Must go. Goodbye. Or should I say, adios, mis amigos. Grandad was right. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. Grandad, I love
you. Te estoy queriendo tanto que no sé querer a nadie más. Te estoy queriendo tanto que no sé vivir si tú no estás. Las noches y los días son para quererte más y más. Te estoy queriendo tanto que me estoy acostumbrando más y más.